Are you ready to break free from the doubts and limits holding you back? Welcome to Embrace Your Value, where therapy meets coaching to help you unlock your true worth and take control of your life.
Hi, I'm Kristen, a trauma therapist dedicated to helping you heal, break old patterns, and reclaim your power.
And I'm Jen, your support coach, here to show you how to set fierce boundaries, embrace self-compassion, and step boldly into the life you deserve.
So whether you're stuck in self-doubt or feeling lost, know this: your value isn't up for negotiation. It's time to own it.
Every week, we tackle real issues that challenge, inspire, and empower you to live with purpose and confidence.
So grab your favorite drink, take a deep breath, and let's get started.
Because you're not here to play small. It's time to embrace your value. I want to tell you about a woman I worked with who had a gift. She was a writer, not a hobbyist on the weekends writing, genuinely talented, had something to say writing. And she had been sitting on a manuscript for 3 years. 3 years. It was done. It had been done. And every single time she got close to sending it out into the world, something stopped her. When I finally asked her what that something was, she didn't hesitate. I'm afraid of what people will think. Not that it wasn't good enough. She knew it was good. Not that the market was too hard. She understood the odds. She was afraid, specifically afraid of being judged. Putting something real into the world and having it looked at and found that it was lacking. So the manuscript sat. And she sat with it, safe, invisible, unexpressed. I see versions of this story constantly. The woman who doesn't speak up in the meeting because she's worried how it will land. The woman who dresses to disappear rather than to be seen. The woman who has an opinion she's been swallowing for years because the risk of saying it out loud feels too high. The fear of being judged keeps a lot of women stuck in lives that they've outgrown. And today we're going to talk about why and what becomes possible when you stop letting it run the show. Welcome to Embrace Your Value. I'm Jen Anderson, Beliefs and Boundary Specialist, and your co-host.
And I'm Kristen Burris, trauma therapist. Today, we're going deep on something that shows up in almost every conversation we have on this podcast: fear of judgment. Because underneath so much of what keeps people stuck, if you dig far enough, you'll find this.
The thing that keeps women small when they're ready to be bigger. Quiet when they have something to say. Agreeable when they actually disagree.
And it's not a character flaw. It's deeply biologically wired, which is why understanding it means so much before you try to move through it.
Let me describe what judgment fear actually looks like in daily life. Because I think we tend to picture it as stage fright. Big dramatic moment of being exposed. But in reality, it's much quieter than that. And much more constant. It's the woman who has a different opinion in a group conversation and decides in the half second before she speaks that it's not worth the risk. So she nods. She agrees. She says, yeah, totally, and feels a small piece of herself go quiet. It's the woman who has a business idea she's been turning over for 2 years, but hasn't told anyone about it because saying it out loud makes it real, and real means it can be judged. It's the woman who downplays her accomplishments in front of certain people so they don't feel threatened or see her as arrogant. It's the woman who edits every text message twice before sending it, who rehearses conversations before she has them, who replays them after to assess how she came across. It's exhausting. And it's so normalized that a lot of women don't even recognize it as fear. They just think that's what being considerate looks like. But there's a meaningful difference between being thoughtful about how you show up and editing yourself down to the version that offends no one and costs you everything. I like to call this living behind glass. You're present, you're functioning, you're even connecting in a limited way, but there's always something between you and the room or the other person. A layer of management, a quiet, constant calculation of what's safe to let out and what needs to stay in. And the cost of living behind glass isn't just exhaustion. It's the growing sense that no one actually knows you because they don't. They know the edited version. And the edited version, no matter how polished, is lonely in a very specific way.
I want to explain why the fear of judgment is so powerful, because I think when people understand where it actually comes from, they stop fighting themselves for having it. Human beings are, at our core, social animals. We are not built for solitude. Across most of human evolutionary history, belonging to a group was not a preference. It was survival. Being excluded from the group meant exposure to predators, starvation, even death. The brain learned this long ago, and it wired accordingly. The same neural networks that process physical pain also process social rejection. This is not a metaphor. Brain imaging studies have shown that being excluded or judged activates the same regions as physical injury. The pain of judgment is, neurologically, real pain. So when a woman hesitates before speaking up, when her heart rate rises before she shares an opinion, her nervous system is not being dramatic. It is responding to a perceived threat that at a very deep level still associates with survival. Now, the rational mind knows that sharing your opinion in a meeting will not get you exiled from the village. But the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, does not always receive that memo. It is still operating under an older software, and it is very good at its job. This is also why willpower alone doesn't solve judgment fear. You can't just decide to stop caring about what people think. The fear is not primarily cognitive. It lives in the body, and it has to be addressed at that level through repeated experiences of being seen and not rejected, through gradually expanding the window of what feels safe to express. What rewires the fear is not thinking differently about judgment. It's about surviving it over and over in small ways until the nervous system updates its threat assessment and software.
Get into the specific patterns because the fear of judgment doesn't just operate as one big thing. It shows up in distinct ways that are worth naming separately. So the first one is why we edit ourselves. Editing is the most universal. And I want to go a little deeper on it because I think the mechanism is important. When we edit ourselves for an audience, real or imagined, we are essentially running two versions of ourselves simultaneously. There's the authentic response, the genuine thought, the real feeling. And then there's this processed version, the one that's been filtered through the question, will this be okay? And that filtering takes energy, significant energy that can be going towards creativity, connection, actual presence in the conversation. And here's the thing that often surprises my clients when we start to examine the editing. The filtered version is almost never more effective than the authentic one. It's a safer feeling, but it's not actually better. The most compelling communicators, the ones people feel genuinely moved by, genuinely connected to, are not the ones who are the most polished. They're the ones who are the most real. Authenticity is not a soft skill. It's the most persuasive thing a human being can bring to any room.
Oh, I so agree with that. And from a clinical perspective, the chronic editing of self is one of the more significant contributors to what we call self-alienation, a growing sense of disconnection from your own inner experience. When you spend enough time performing a filtered version of yourself, you can start to lose access to the unfiltered one. The authentic voice gets quieter, harder to hear. This is one reason therapy can feel poignant for people, not because the therapist tells them something new, but because it may be the first space they've had in years where they're not editing. And hearing themselves think out loud without the filter is for some people a genuinely unfamiliar experience.
Let's talk about why confidence grows when you stop performing. I think we've touched on this in a previous episode, and that is the idea that confidence comes after action, not before. I want to revisit it here in the specific context of judgment fear because it plays out in a particular way. When you're performing, you're living behind glass. You never get real feedback on your real self. You get feedback on the performance. And even when that feedback is positive, it doesn't land as confidence. Because somewhere underneath, you know the applause is for the version of you that you constructed for the room, not for you. Real confidence, the kind that actually holds up, that comes from being seen as you genuinely are and discovering that you're still standing, that people still want to be in the room with you, that your actual opinion didn't destroy the relationship, that your real voice offered without the filter has value. You cannot build that kind of confidence from behind the glass. You have to come out from behind it, imperfectly, incrementally, with a lot of discomfort at first. But every time you do, every time you say the real thing and survive the saying of it, you chip away at the fear. Not all at once, but consistently.
There's a concept called disconfirmation that's useful here. Our fears often come with predictions attached. If I show my real self, I will be rejected. If I say the honest thing, people will think less of me. If I stop performing, no one will want to be around me. Disconfirmation is what happens when those predictions don't come true. When you show your real self and the relationship deepens instead of ending, when you say the honest thing and people respond with appreciation rather than judgment, when you stop performing and discover that the people still in the room are the ones who actually wanted to know you. Each disconfirmation is a small update to the threat assessment. And over time, those updates accumulate into something that genuinely feels like freedom. Why does authenticity bring better relationships? This one is the gift on the other side of the work. And I think it's important to talk about because a lot of people are afraid that if they stop editing themselves, they'll lose relationships. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes they're right. Some relationships are built on a curated version of you. They depend on you staying agreeable, staying small, and staying predictable. And when you stop doing that, those relationships may change, and some may not survive. That is a real loss, and I don't want to minimize it. But here's what also happens. When you stop editing, when you start showing up as you actually are, the people who are drawn to you are drawn to you, not to your performance, not to your usefulness, not to the version of you that makes them feel comfortable. And those relationships are categorically different from the managed ones. They have a quality of being truly known that the edited relationships, no matter how long-standing, simply cannot provide.
I've watched this happen with clients who were terrified that being more authentic would push people away. And yes, occasionally someone falls away. But what they describe on the other side is not depletion. It's something more like relief, a smaller circle, but a real one. One where they don't have to perform in order to belong. And that's not a consolation prize. That is one of the deepest forms of connection available to us. There is a line I come back to often. You can be liked by everyone or known by someone, but you rarely get both at the same time. And for women who have spent years being liked by everyone, the experience of being truly known by someone is often something they didn't realize they were missing until they finally had it. I want to spend a moment naming what it actually costs to stay small, because I think we underestimate it. The same way you can underestimate how heavy something is until you put it down. The obvious cost is the unlived life, the manuscript that never gets sent, the business that never gets started, the conversation that never gets had, the opinion that keeps getting swallowed. But there's a subtler cost that I think matters just as much. And it's this. When you shrink yourself consistently, you communicate something to the people around you. You communicate that you are not someone who takes up space, that your thoughts and needs and presence are negotiable, that you can be edited down without consequence. And people take you at your word, not maliciously. They respond to the signal you're sending them. So the woman who stays quiet in the meeting because she's afraid of judgment trains the room to not expect her input. The woman who keeps agreeing trains the relationship to not make room for her disagreements or for her to even have an opinion. The woman who plays small trains the people in her life to think of her as someone without much to offer. And then she wonders why she doesn't feel seen. The shrinking is both the symptom and the cause. And the only way to change what the room expects from you is to change what you're willing to bring into it.
So, some practical tools, as we like to give in our episodes. Here's 3 tools to take with you this week.
First one is your weekly writing prompt. What would I do differently if I wasn't afraid of people's opinions? I'm going to encourage you to write the full, uncensored answer. The things you'd say, the things you'd stop saying, the choices that you'd make, the way you'd show up differently. And then look at that list and pick just one thing, just one, something small enough to be doable, but real enough to matter. And try it this week. Not perfectly, not dramatically, just try it once. Show up a little more like the answer to that question and a little less like the edited version.
So this one's called the editing catch. This week, I'd like to invite you to practice noticing the moment of editing, that half second before you filter yourself. You don't have to stop filtering immediately. Just notice it. Notice when you're about to say something and you pull back. Notice when you shape your words for a particular audience. Notice when you agree with something you actually don't agree with. Just noticing without judgment builds the awareness that makes change possible. Because you cannot change a pattern you can't see. And most of the editing happens below conscious awareness until you start looking for it. Once you can see it, you can start to make choices about it. But awareness comes first.
And alongside the noticing, you could also choose one moment this week to come out from behind the glass, to again offer that unedited response, to say the real thing. And this one might be like an in the moment kind of thing, where the first one I talked about could be something that you're thinking about doing and you're picking it from a list. This could be a tiny gesture that you could do. It could be an honest opinion in a very low stakes conversation, a genuine answer to how are you? And so instead of saying fine, you might say, I'm tired today, or it's been a great week and I'm excited. Sometimes we stifle that as much as we stifle the bad. But sharing something you'd normally keep private with someone you trust or someone, I mean, I would love to say always someone you trust, but I feel like sometimes when we trust them, we share those things. So maybe even someone you encounter a lot. But give yourself one unedited moment this week and just notice what happens. Notice how the other person responds versus how you might think they will. And notice how you feel afterward. Because most people tell me that even when it's uncomfortable, there's something underneath that discomfort that feels a lot like relief. And that relief is your real self exhaling.
So I want to close with something I think about often in my work with clients. The fear of judgment is at its root a fear of belonging, a fear that if people see the real you, unedited, unfiltered, fully expressed, they will decide you are too much or not enough or simply not what they were looking for. And I understand that fear. I've sat with it in my own life. I've sat with hundreds of people who carry it. It's one of the most human fears there is. But here's what I also know. The version of you that hides, that edits and performs and stays safely behind the glass, that version cannot be truly loved because she's not fully visible. And you cannot receive the love and belonging you're looking for while keeping the real you out of reach. The path to the connection you want runs directly through the vulnerability you're terrified of. There is no shortcut. There is no version of being truly known that doesn't require being fully and truly seen. And being seen, really seen, is terrifying because then that person can hurt you. And when it happens, one of the most healing experiences available to us as human beings. So this week, when the fear of judgment shows up, and it will, I'd like you to try something. Instead of asking yourself, what will they think? Try asking this. What do I think? What do I actually believe? What does the unedited, happy version of me have to say? And then, when you're ready, offer a little of that. In a moment that matters to a person that matters. Because the world does not need another polished performance. It needs you, the real you.
Yes. And if you found this episode useful, please feel free to subscribe, like it, share it, leave us a comment. We always love to hear from you. And until next week, have a great one and be unfiltered. We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thank you for being here with us today.
If today's episode hit home, don't just keep it to yourself. Subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Because everyone deserves to know their worth.
Next week, we're diving even deeper with more insights and tools to help you break free from limitations and live authentically.
Until then, keep raising your standards, owning your worth, and embracing your value.